Have you ever wondered what happens when the dead cannot rest in peace because there's no way to carry them home? In the remote villages of the Democratic Republic of Congo, death doesn't just bring grief. It brings an impossible choice. A choice between honoring your loved one with dignity and doing whatever it takes to bring them to their final resting place. And sometimes, that means wrapping their body in blankets, tying them to the back of a motorcycle, and riding for hours through treacherous roads that most vehicles can't even travel. I know what you're thinking. How did it come to this? Why would anyone transport their deceased family members this way? But before we judge what seems unthinkable, we need to understand the reality that millions face in one of the world's most resource-starved nations. Let me take a quick pause here. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from and how the weather is treating you today. I'd love to know how you're doing. Now, here's what most people believe about funeral practices. We assume that when someone dies, there's a system in place. Ambulances, hearses, morgues, funeral homes. We take for granted that the dead will be handled with care and transported with respect. That's the conventional belief, especially for those of us living in countries with established infrastructure. But in rural DRC, that assumption crumbles completely. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the real story of how the dead are transported in the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically in the eastern region. I'll share with you the village where this practice became a documented reality, why families are forced into these heartbreaking decisions, and how one simple vehicle changed everything for an entire community. This isn't folklore. This is happening right now. Let's start with the place itself. Kirumba. Kirumba is a town of about 90,000 people in the Lubero territory, tucked away in the eastern edge of the DRC near the Rwandan border. It's a place where malaria and typhoid strike hard and often. It's a place where armed groups, remnants of civil wars from the 1990s, still commit violence. And it's a place where the roads are so poor that even getting basic medical care can feel impossible, let alone arranging a proper burial. Until 2017, when someone died in Kirumba, their family faced a brutal reality. They had to carry the body themselves, sometimes on wooden stretchers, sometimes for 3 kilometers under the scorching sun, sometimes for 10 kilometers, sweating and straining with every step. And when that became too exhausting, or when the distance was too far, they turned to the only other option available: motorcycles. Now, you might ask, how exactly does someone transport a body on a motorcycle? Here's how it worked. If the family could afford a coffin, they would place the body inside a simple plank coffin and bind it tightly with ropes to the back of the motorcycle. If they couldn't afford a coffin, which was often the case in the most remote areas, they would wrap the body in a blanket, sometimes securing it with tree branches on either side, and tie it directly to the bike. In some cases, one person would hold onto the body while another person drove. Then came the journey. Not a quick ride down the street. We're talking about distances of up to 400 kilometers in extreme cases. Hours and hours of travel on unpaved, dangerous roads. Roads that flood. Roads that collapse. Roads that most vehicles simply cannot navigate. This wasn't about disrespect. This was about survival. This was about families doing whatever they could to ensure their loved ones reached the burial ground. Because in Congolese culture, just like in many African traditions, how you honor the dead matters deeply. It's sacred. And leaving someone unburied or far from home is unthinkable. Before I go further, I want to hear from you. What topic about African culture or history baffles you the most? Drop it in the comments below, and I'll research it and make a video just for you. Now let's talk about cost. Because this is where the weight of poverty becomes unbearable. Renting a hearse or hiring a formal funeral vehicle in the DRC can cost anywhere from several hundred to over $1,000. For context, many families in rural Kirumba survive on a few dollars a day. $1,000 might represent an entire year's income or more. So even though transporting a body by motorcycle seems unthinkable to us, for these families, spending that kind of money on a hearse is equally impossible. The motorcycle option, while cheaper, still wasn't free. Riders, sometimes called boda-bodas, would charge families for these long-distance trips, and even then, many couldn't afford it. So men in the community would take turns carrying bodies by hand. One farmer in Kirumba recalled helping to carry his grandfather's body 10 kilometers to a family burial field. Halfway through, the body became so heavy they had to remove it from the coffin just to keep moving. Near the cemetery, they placed it back inside. Can you imagine that? The physical toll, the emotional weight, the indignity of it all. And this is where the story takes a turn. In 2017, something extraordinary happened. A member of the National Assembly named Edouard Kayove-Kola, who represented the Lubero territory, decided to do something about it. He donated a simple white minivan to the people of Kirumba. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have cushioned seats or air conditioning. In fact, most of the seats were removed. But it had a siren on top, and it could carry a coffin. That minivan became the town's first public hearse. And it changed everything. Suddenly, families didn't have to carry their loved ones for kilometers in the heat. They didn't have to tie bodies to motorcycles. They didn't have to choose between dignity and survival. For an annual membership fee of about $1.30 per household, any family in Kirumba could use the hearse when they needed it. The driver of that hearse, a man named Mumbra Mukuhi Daniel, now transports about 3 bodies a day. Sometimes more, especially when violence flares up in the region. The hearse runs constantly, and for the people of Kirumba, it has become a symbol of equality. Rich or poor, everyone has access to the same respectful transport for their dead. One teacher, a man named Kambale Mukosa, lost his 1-year-old son to malaria. He said the hearse helped him immensely. Another local farmer said the hearse had become a salvation for the population, because before it existed, the men suffered. Now here's something powerful. In 2018, local authorities in Kirumba went even further. They banned the use of motorcycles for transporting the dead entirely and made the hearse mandatory. Families who refused to join the program and continued using motorcycles faced fines of up to $50. But not everyone was happy. About 30% of the town refused to join the program. Why? Because they didn't trust the management committee overseeing the hearse. They believed the funds weren't being used properly, and that the committee should have already bought a second vehicle with the money collected. And they had a point. Because when multiple people died at the same time, the single hearse couldn't transport everyone. Some families still had to wait or find other means. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're finding this story as eye-opening as I did when I first learned about it. Your subscription means the world to me. This channel is still growing, and every single one of you helps keep these important stories alive. So what does all of this tell us? It tells us that dignity in death is not a given. It's a privilege. And for millions of people living in rural areas across the DRC and other parts of Africa, even the most basic acts we take for granted require creativity, sacrifice, and heartbreaking compromise. The motorcycle transport of the dead wasn't born out of disrespect. It was born out of desperation, out of love, out of a refusal to abandon cultural practices, even when the resources to honor them properly simply don't exist. And while Kirumba now has its hearse, Countless other villages across the DRC still face the same impossible choices. Some still use motorcycles. Some use hand-pulled carts. Some transport bodies by foot or on riverboats. The struggle continues. But here's what I want you to take away from this. The next time you hear about practices in other parts of the world that seem strange or even shocking, pause. Ask yourself what circumstances might force people into those situations. Because often, what looks like a lack of dignity is actually the opposite. It's people fighting with everything they have to preserve dignity against impossible odds. What part of this story struck you the most? Was it the distances families traveled? The cost of a hearse compared to daily income? Or the community coming together to create a solution? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what moved you. Before I close, let me leave you with this. The story of Kirumba reminds us that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can transform entire communities. One donated vehicle, $1.30 per household, and suddenly, thousands of people can bury their loved ones with the respect they deserve. Our stories, especially the difficult ones, deserve to be remembered. They deserve to be told with honesty and care. If this video touched you, subscribe to this channel and keep these important conversations alive. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.